Okay.
All right. Happy Saturday morning to you.
Oh, today's Saturday?
Saturday.
Yeah. What do you got on my schedule for today?
We are going to talk about the used car market.
Yeah.
I sent my dad this report, linked down in the description. You don't need a subscription for it or anything. It was 24 pages, and he printed out every single page of it.
I think my son's taking a shot at me. What do you
Yeah,
think?
it's so many pages. Okay, but it's it's really good info, though, and we're going to run through some of it. And the title of today's video,
Yeah.
Wait 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, before you
buy a
buy a
used
used car. Because we figured if we weren't wrong on this once, there's the possibility we could actually be right this time.
Or wrong twice.
We could be. We could become very consistent at this. And so if it turns out that in 60 to 90 days we were wrong again, we'll just do the opposite of what we say when it comes to used cars in the future.
Or if we just keep saying wait 60 to 90 days, eventually we'll be right.
One of these times, like a broken clock.
We'll have to see
be
if the,
right twice.
We'll have to see if the odds makers in Vegas, what odds they put on us. But seriously, we've got great insights from this report. Why don't we start kind of with like the State of the Union, what has changed? Our used car prices, high, low, in between, both on the wholesale and retail side.
High, still high, and going up. There doesn't seem to be any backing down as far as wholesale prices at this point. There seems to be a little bit of a shortage of inventory, and dealers are, and those trying to procure cars are willing to spend pretty much whatever it takes. So the wholesale values have gone up dramatically over the past 11, 12, 13, 14 weeks, and they continue to do so. The one thing that would suggest that it might be slowing down a tad is the number of no-sale vehicles that they're seeing at the auction has gone up slightly. And what that means is those are vehicles that the dealers have said if it doesn't hit a certain floor minimum,
like a reserve price,
then they won't agree to sell it. And the reason it doesn't hit those floor minimums is because, well, it's priced too high to begin with. So there's been more and more of those no sales reported at the auctions, and that's because dealers are finally waking up to a certain degree that the prices can't just continue to go up like they have been and still be able to retail the cars, because there are those additional reconditioning expenses once you've paid too much for that used car at the sale.
And so week over week we keep talking about how used car prices are high. So I think what we want to do today is really talk about what impacts are going to happen on the supply side. And so what's kind of the expectation or what projections are there? And I guess I'll lead in with, you just mentioned me right before we hit record, that loans that are in danger, or what was the phrase?
Hardship, yeah,
is 18 times higher
than it was at this time last year. And that's across all credit tiers. So it's not just people that were in subprime or barely prime. It's across every credit tier. And they anticipate that it's going to get worse once the enhanced unemployment and governmental benefits end at the end of this month.
End of July 2020, yeah.
Yeah, so that they anticipate that there'll be even more people that are in bad positions in their loans where they haven't been able to make their payments, and ultimately that could lead to a higher repossession rate for the banks. And trust me, the banks really don't want to be in the repossession business because they don't really want to be in the used car business. What they want to be in is the used car finance business, because that's where they can make their money. But they don't make money on repossessions because there's an expense to repossess them, and then they have to send them to the sale, and then if they sell it for less than what's worth, then they have to sue the person who defaulted on the loan for the deficiency balance, and well, the likelihood of getting that money is probably somewhat limited.
So we have repossessions are expected to increase over the coming months here.
Yes.
So that's one supply side factor. What are a few of the others?
They expect short-term lease returns to go up.
Which we've been talking about.
Yes,
as well.
Because a lot of them had been delayed because of the beginning of the pandemic, where lease companies were just automatically extending leases because they didn't want the customers to have to come into the dealerships to turn the cars in. So they expect lease return vehicles to increase in number. They're expecting a 250,000 rental car fleet reduction to come into play over the next 180 days, the next 6 months or so. So you can expect the lease returns. You can expect more rental car in the market, which during the next probably 60 to 90 days, as we see that, should, not guaranteed, just remember that, folks, not guaranteed that it'll push the wholesale pricing down, but the indications are that it probably will and should, and so we should start seeing a decrease in some of the used car values. But as we know, what happens on the wholesale side and what happens on the retail side, the wholesale price increases can be much more dramatic than the used car retail price decreases.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen that, honestly, this whole pandemic is that on the wholesale side, prices have changed considerably. The volatility there has been considerable, but then on the retail side, the volatility has been more muted. At times, kind of, prices have stayed high. Even when prices on the wholesale side were going lower. And that's how a lot of dealers, I think we were talking about it last week, Asbury, they made record profits, up 27% year over year for the same month, because they bought inventory when wholesale prices were really low, and they didn't change any of the retail prices. They sold them really high still.
Yep, and they made they cut back on purchases when prices were too high. What that means ultimately is that they'll end up having a shortage of used cars, but they will not have overpaid for their used car inventory that they do have. I suspect, and I think we're looking at towards the end of September, maybe early fall, and we should see hopefully a reasonable decline in the used car prices. That would be my guess, and once again, that's just a guess.
Now, I think there's one other consideration, at least I'd like to bring up, which are the long-term impacts. So if you're not in the market right now, the wait 60 to 90 days doesn't really apply to you, but you're thinking more along the lines of, well, what about next year or the following year? There are less cars being manufactured, and there are less cars that are going to be sold into fleet. There are less cars that are going to be sold into, just into retail in general. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be this really interesting situation that plays out in the used car market, not just now. I mean, what we're seeing now is truly incredible. We had Chris on, who does used car buying, a couple weeks ago. He said he's never seen anything like this. But I think the ramifications of this are going to be some unstable pricing for a couple of years. I mean, it's really unknown what's going to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, reading some of the information, they're thinking that we don't get back to pre-COVID levels in pricing and in sales until maybe 2023.
Exactly, that's what I read as well.
So, when you're looking at another 2.5 years, it means this is a fairly significant recessionary period for the automobile business. Might not be struck as hard as it was during the Great Recession, but I think it's going to have some major impact in many ways, not just on the amount of cars that are sold, but I think some dealerships that are undercapitalized are going to go by the wayside.
Or they'll get bought out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or as I've said in the past, they'll kind of thin the herd.
Yeah.
And, in marketplaces that couldn't necessarily support 7 or 8 BMW dealerships, you might suddenly only have 6 in a year's time. Or in a marketplace that had 10 or 12 Toyota dealerships, you might suddenly only have 8 or 9. It's great to expand the number of franchises you have when everything's going well, but when the economy suddenly takes a downturn, it kind of exposes those that really weren't in the position to be in the dealership business to begin with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we're right or wrong again. We'll do a little.
Every 60 to 90 days, we'll do another one of these.
we should we'll grab the footage from the previous video,
Yeah.
But the trends are prices are still very inflated relative to where they were pre-COVID, during the beginning of COVID, and they're quite high. But the influx of supply that we've been thinking is going to come to fruition is on the horizon.
Yes.
And it's still unknown whether that's going to have enough of an impact to offset the increase in demand, because there has been, and that's a whole nother chapter and component of this story, a huge increase in demand in used cars because the disinterest in public transportation, which makes total sense.
It does, and then the other reason is that there's just a dearth of new vehicles at this point in time. So people are settling for pre-owned vehicles because they can't get the new vehicle that they want. So there's a couple factors that are driving these numbers, but ultimately I gotta believe that the prices have to drop a little bit, and especially if unemployment continues at the rate that it's continuing at, if federal assistance dries up, then I think at a certain point the reality of the situation's really got to set in.
It's your airplane quote.
Huh?
Airplane quote.
The shit's got to hit the fan. It can't. You can't have
Triggered.
all the indicators. Yes, all the indicators that we have, and then things remain normal. At a certain point, everybody's going to feel the pain of the economic downturn. I know there was a thing yesterday that Wall Street's having some record numbers, but Wall Street isn't everyday people, and everyday people are impacted much more severely, it seems, than Wall Street is. So at a certain point, those on Wall Street are probably going to take a bath because those of us on Main Street really won't be able to support their habits any longer.
And we don't actually live on Main Street. It's called Calvert, but that's okay. Anyway,
yeah. But we're thinking of moving to Main Street.
If you're interested in these weekly updates, subscribe. Leave a comment down below.
I've got an idea.
Yeah.
Even if you're not interested in these weekly episodes, still subscribe.
Just hit the like button.
Hit the like button, subscribe. Tell all your friends. Tell your neighbors.
Tell your neighbors.
Yeah. Tell all the unemployed out there to subscribe.
The person that drops off your mail.
Yeah. Tell your mailman.
Tell your mailman.
Or mail person or mail gal or whatever.
All right. Thanks, Dad.
My pleasure.